Well, new at 10, hog farms are a staple here in the Midwest, which means it's important to keep them disease-free. Pork production facilities in the tri-states work with packing plants around the Midwest to help provide quality meat to consumers. But entering the facilities and dealing with those pigs, not always simple. Various precautions must take place because disease and sickness can be transported in ways you might not even realize.
Any kind of trailer or any kind of farm equipment or boots can bring disease, virus, bacteria to inside the farm, which is not good for our pigs.
And the biggest concern is African swine fever found in the Dominican Republic and Haiti. But there are also other diseases that spread across the U.S. that can lower production.